What is materialism? Once a student asked me, what does it mean to be living as a materialist? To me, you're not necessarily a materialist simply because you enjoy nice clothes or you have a nice house or because you enjoy the pleasures of the senses or food or money or sex or any of these number of things which one often thinks about when one thinks of materialism. For me, what it means to be a materialist is something much more existential. It has not to do with your outlook on life, what kind of lifestyle in which you are living. It has much more to do with a certain way of being, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Right now, everything that we know about life and existence through the body, the mind, and the senses is all physical. So any type of knowledge which is gathered through the five senses, through hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, and touching, is physical. It is physical by nature. So in other words, the very way of being a materialist simply means that you are unable to perceive anything beyond the five senses, the body and the mind. So according to me, that means you are living as a materialist. So that means you may be a devotee worshipping in a temple, but if his perception is unable to move beyond the physical realm, he's still a materialist. Or you may be going out in the world doing wonderful works of charity, or you may be a believer in God or a disbeliever in God, but still, if your perception of life is unable to move beyond the material realm, then still you are a materialist. And what that also means is that, let's look into this. Everything that we know about life, it's just the perceptions of your own mind if we really look very deeply into it. You think, okay, something is large and small, but relative to what? What is large, what is small? Of course, an ant may seem very small, but relative to the size of an atom or the size of an electron, an ant is enormous. Or the size of an elephant relative to the ant. Even your ideas of what's large, what's small, what's good and what's bad, what is good and bad? It's just really what you find pleasant or unpleasant, what you value and what you do not value, which, as some of you know, is relative from one culture to another, from one society to another. So these are all really just the perceptions of our own mind. What is hot and cold? Nobody even really knows. What is hot and cold is just relative to what is your body temperature right now. In fact, there are certain methods in Tibet which they practice a form of meditation which is called Tummo meditation. A lot of university studies have been done on these yogis who have been practicing Tummo meditation. They'll be sitting in ice-cold environment, totally naked, but still they've learned a certain meditation as to how to keep the body's temperature self-regulating itself, how to control the bioelectricity of the body, how to distribute the heat throughout the whole system in such a way that even in very cold climates, in their experience, they're quite well, they're quite comfortable. So even our perception of what is hot and what is cold, what is just about anything, is really just the perceptions of our own mind, which is physical, which is very much rooted in the physical. It reminds me of, it's a bit like this. There was a Zen master he overheard two disciples speaking, and they were looking at a flag. One disciple said, "The flag is moving." The second disciple said, "The wind is moving." The master said, "No, you're both wrong. It's neither the flag which is moving, it's neither the wind which is moving. It's your minds which are moving." And he was pointing exactly to the same reality. Everything that we know about life, after all, why is it that all the people in this room right now, we all have a subjective perception of what life is? The reality is the same. We all live in the same existence, being supported by the same forces, but each one of us in this room is having a subjective experience of life. We're all taking in this heap of impressions from the outside world. Now, what the mind is recycling out of this information. Imagine, for example, the mind is like a factory. You're taking in this raw data. Now, what the mind manufactures out of this, it's manufacturing various different kinds of products. So, in other words, your experience of life, whether it's misery or freedom, whether it's joy or confusion, whether it's suffering or well-being, this is totally self-created, because that is precisely what our experience of life is. Life fundamentally is a certain type of experience. But still, as long as our experience of life is limited to the body, the mind, and the five senses, then everything that we know about existence is just according to the physical. So, all spiritual processes, in one way or another, if I were to say really what is the essence, it is deepening your awareness. Or in other words, if we are to talk about meditation, meditation is learning how to become more conscious of the projections of the mind. Because if we do not learn how to become more conscious of what are the projections of the mind, how is the mind imposing itself onto the reality, as if there's this huge filter, a huge barrier between what is you and what is reality, at least in our experience, simply because we've not taken the time, effort, and energy to inquire more deeply into what is the working of the mind, how is the mind projecting itself onto reality. In the East, there's an analogy of a human being as a chariot. The physical chariot is the physical body. The horses, these are your organs of action. Your legs, your arms, your other sense organs which you're using to carry yourself through in the world. The charioteer, now the charioteer who's riding on the chariot, he has to be aware of so many factors. He has to be aware of the other drivers on the road, what is the climate, which direction to move, which direction to not to move. So this charioteer, this is the discrimination of your intellect. As you're living in the world, you need to put to use the judgments of the intellect, the discriminations of the intellect. There's a train that's moving towards you. You need to make a discrimination, whether to move, whether not to move. Now, besides the charioteer, there is also the rider of the chariot, which in yoga we've called Sakshi. Sakshi simply means the witness. You see, whenever you're involved in any kind of activity in the world, if you're really sensitive and perceptive, you'll find there are always these two aspects of you. One of you is the actor, the doer, the ego, the sense of identity. But there's another aspect of your being which is simply a watcher. That is none other than pure awareness. Just simply pure consciousness, which is just like a mirror. So your awareness is just like a mirror. You bring anything in front of this mirror. It does not have this judgmental attitude of the ego. The mirror never says, okay, I'm not going to reflect this. This is not to my liking. I'm going to accept this. This is to my liking. It does not have these prejudiced attitudes. It simply is reflecting. And that is precisely what the quality of pure awareness is. Just simply a mirror reflecting reality as it is. But still, even awareness is still physical. So, what do we mean by yoga? Yoga means union. When at the level of your perception, you come to know of another realm within you, which is beyond the body, the mind, and the five senses. If there is such a thing, you don't have to take my word for it. Or is it God? Again, your ideas of what is God. is mostly just your projection of the mind. Different societies, for the black man he has a black god. For India, in India, of course their gods speak Sanskrit language. Not the case for the Jews. For them their God speaks Hebrew. So, all these different creations, in terms of our philosophies of the world, all the various different religions that have been created, these are all just different projections of the mind. So one way to, if you want to come to terms with so-called reality or so-called truth, one thing that's absolutely essential is to learn how to become more conscious of the projections of your own mind. Otherwise, this mind is in such a way that unless you're absolutely conscious, it sees whatever it wants to see, creating things in its own image. So, sometimes you see the snake as a rope, sometimes you see the rope as a snake. This is precisely what we mean by the projections of the mind. Just the various different delusions, misunderstandings, the cravings, the attachments of the mind, all the unfulfilled desires, all these things which are preventing a deeper quality of insight and clarity from functioning in our lives.